Jake rubbed his tired eyes and squinted at the road ahead. He'd been driving for what felt like forever, and his back was killing him. The GPS on his phone kept saying recalculating route every few minutes, which was getting really annoying. All he wanted was to find a decent place to sleep for the night. Come on, there has to be something around here, he muttered to himself, taking another sip of his lukewarm coffee. The highway stretched endlessly in front of him, with nothing but desert and rocks on both sides. His business trip to Las Vegas had run way longer than expected, and now he was stuck driving through the middle of nowhere in Nevada. Just when Jake was starting to think he might have to sleep in his car, they spotted something in the distance. A neon sign flickered against the dark sky, and as he got closer, he could make out the words Starlight in vacancy. It wasn't exactly a 5-star hotel, but it looked clean enough, and honestly, he was too exhausted to be picky. Jake pulled into the parking lot and noticed something odd right away. There were only 3 other cars parked there, but the hotel looked like it could hold at least 50 guests. The building itself was interesting too. It had this retro style that reminded him of old movies from the 1950s, but there was something else about it that he couldn't quite put his finger on. Architecture seemed almost too perfect, like someone had designed it in a computer program rather than built it with real materials. He grabbed his overnight bag from the back seat and walked toward the entrance. The automatic doors opened with a soft whoosh, and Jake stepped into the lobby. The first thing that hit him was how quiet it was. Not just quiet, but almost eerily silent. Even his footsteps seemed muffled by the thick carpet beneath his feet. Lobby was decorated in a way that made Jake feel like he had stepped back in time. There were vintage leather chairs arranged around glass tables, and the walls were covered with what looked like original artwork from decades past. But here's the weird part: everything looked brand new, like it had just been installed yesterday. The leather wasn't cracked or faded, and the artwork didn't have a speck of dust on it. Behind the front desk stood an elderly man with the brightest blue eyes Jake had ever seen. The man smiled warmly as Jake approached, and something about that smile made Jake feel oddly comfortable, like he was greeting an old friend instead of a stranger. "Good evening," the man said, his voice carrying a slight accent that Jake couldn't identify. "Welcome to the Starlight Inn. I've been expecting." "You?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "Expecting me?" "I don't have a reservation." The man chuckled softly and pulled out an old-fashioned guest registry book. "Oh, but you do. Room 237, just like always." He slid the book across the counter, and Jake noticed that his name was already written there in elegant handwriting. "Strange," Jake said, staring at the signature that looked exactly like his own. "I've never been here before, haven't you?" the man asked, tilting his head slightly. "Time has a funny way of playing tricks on us, doesn't it?" He handed Jake an actual metal key, not one of those plastic key cards that most hotels used these days. "Your room is on the 2nd floor, 3rd door on the right. The elevator is just around the corner." Jake took the key, feeling its unusual weight in his palm. It was warm to the touch, which seemed odd since metal keys were usually cold. "Thanks, I guess." "What time is checkout?" "Whenever you're ready to leave," the man replied with that same mysterious smile. "Some guests stay longer than others. It all depends on what they're looking for." As Jake walked away from the desk, he could swear he heard the man whisper something, but when he turned around, the old man was busy writing in his registry book as if nothing had happened. Jake shrugged it off and headed toward the elevator. The hallway on the 2nd floor was dimly lit with old-fashioned sconces that cast long shadows on the walls. The carpet here was different from the lobby. It had this weird geometric pattern that seemed to shift slightly when Jake wasn't looking directly at it. He figured it was just his tired eyes playing tricks on him. Finding room 237 was easy enough, and the old key turned smoothly in the lock. Jake pushed open the door and flicked on the light switch. The room was simple but clean, with a comfortable-looking bed, a small table, and a chair by the window. Everything seemed normal, except for a few small details that nagged at him first. There was this constant humming sound, so quiet that he almost didn't notice it at first. It seemed to be coming from the walls themselves, like the building's electrical system was working overtime. Second, the air in the room had a metallic taste to it, similar to what you might experience before a thunderstorm. And third, the window showed a view of the parking lot, but the landscape beyond looked different somehow. like the desert had been replaced with something else entirely. Jake set his bag down and walked to the window for a closer look. The parking lot was definitely the same one he had walked across just minutes ago, but beyond it, where there should have been empty desert, there seemed to be structures in the distance. Not buildings exactly, but shapes that caught and reflected, light in ways that didn't make sense. I'm just tired, he told himself, closing the curtains. My brain is making stuff up because I need sleep. He brushed his teeth, changed into his pajamas, and crawled into bed. The mattress was surprisingly comfortable, and the sheets felt like they were made from some kind of material he had never encountered before. They were incredibly soft, but also seemed to regulate his body temperature perfectly. As Jake lay there in the darkness, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about this place. The humming in the walls continued, and occasionally, he thought he heard voices in the distance, speaking in languages he didn't recognize. But exhaustion was winning the battle against curiosity, and his eyelids grew heavier with each passing minute. Just before he drifted off to sleep, Jake could have sworn he heard someone walking in the hallway outside his door. The footsteps were soft and measured, like someone was taking their time, maybe even stopping to listen at each door. He thought about getting up to check, but sleep was pulling him down into its depths. The last thing Jake remembered was the strange thought that he felt more at home in this weird little hotel than he had felt anywhere in months. It was like his body recognized this place, even though his mind insisted he had never been here before. And with that confusing thought, he finally fell into the deepest sleep he had experienced in years. Outside his window, the mysterious shapes in the distance seemed to pulse with a gentle light, as if they were breathing. And in the hallway, those soft footsteps continued their patient journey, stopping just outside room 237 before moving on into the night. Jake woke up feeling more refreshed than he had in months. The weird humming sound was still there, but somehow it had become comforting, like white noise that helped him sleep better. He stretched and checked his phone. It was already 9:30 in the morning. He couldn't remember the last time he had slept so deeply without waking up even once. As he was getting dressed, he heard a gentle knock at his door. Housekeeping, came a soft voice from the hallway. Maid. Jake quickly threw on his shirt and opened the door, expecting to see a typical hotel cleaning lady with a cart full of towels and cleaning supplies. Instead, he found himself face to face with the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She was wearing a standard hotel uniform, a simple blue dress with the Starlight Inn logo. But everything else about her was anything but ordinary. Her skin had this subtle glow to it, like she was lit from within by some kind of soft light. Her hair was a deep black color, but when the hallway light hit it just right, it seemed to shimmer with hints of silver and blue. But it was her eyes that really caught Jake's attention. They were violet, not blue, not purple, but a genuine violet color that he was pretty sure didn't exist in nature. They were also incredibly expressive, and when she looked at him, it felt like she was seeing straight into his soul. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, and her voice was like music. It had this melodic quality that made Jake want to keep listening to her talk forever. "I hope you slept well." Jake blinked, confused by the casual way she had addressed him. Yeah, I did. Thanks, but do we know each other?" The woman smiled, and Jake felt his heart skip a beat. "Oh, we know each other very well. My name is Luna, and I've been waiting for you to come back." "Come back?" Jake stepped back slightly, trying to process what she was saying. "I'm sorry, but I think you have me confused with someone else. I've never been to this hotel before." Luna tilted her head, studying his face with those incredible violet eyes. "Are you sure about that? Sometimes our minds protect us from memories that are too overwhelming to handle." She reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out what looked like a photograph. She held it out to Jake, and he took it with trembling hands. The image showed him and Luna standing together in what appeared to be a garden, but it was unlike any garden Jake had ever seen. The flowers were impossible colors, bright blue roses, golden sunflowers that seemed to glow, and trees with leaves that looked like they were made of crystal. In the photo, Jake was wearing clothes he didn't recognize. A simple white shirt and pants that seemed to be made from some kind of shimmering material. He had his arm around Luna, and both of them were smiling like they were the happiest people in the universe. The strangest part was that Jake looked exactly the same as he did now, but somehow younger and more peaceful. "This isn't possible," Jake whispered, staring at the image. "I would remember this. I would remember you." "Would you?" Luna asked gently. "Our minds are more complex than we think. Sometimes we forget things that are too beautiful, too perfect, because our regular world doesn't have room for that kind of wonder." Jake looked up from the photograph and found Luna watching him with an expression that was both sad and hopeful. "I don't understand what's happening here. Are you saying we're together? Like, in a relationship?" "We're more than that," Luna said softly. "We're connected in ways that go beyond what most people experience. You visit me here every few years, and each time we get to spend a little time together before you have to go back to your regular life." "That's crazy," Jake said. But even as he spoke the words, he felt a strange flutter of recognition in his chest. Looking at Luna felt like coming home after a long journey, even though he was absolutely certain he had never met her before. "Is it crazy?" Luna asked. "Or is it just different from what you're used to? There are many things in this universe that we don't understand, but that doesn't make them less real." Jake sat down heavily on the edge of his bed, still holding the photograph. "Let's say I believe you, which I'm not sure I do. Why can't I remember any of this? Why would I forget someone like you?" Luna sat down beside him, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Because your world and my world are very different places. When you go back to your regular life, your mind needs to focus on the things that belong there. Your job, your friends, your everyday responsibilities. Memories of me would only make that harder. Your world?" Yep. Jake looked at her more closely. "What do you mean, your world?" Luna smiled, and Jake noticed that her teeth were perfectly white and straight, but also somehow different from normal human teeth. They seemed to catch and reflect light in an unusual way. "I'm not from Earth, Jake. I'm from a place that's very far away from here. This hotel exists in a space between our worlds where people like us can meet and spend time together." Jake stood up quickly, the photograph fluttering to the floor. "Okay, now I know you're messing with me. Aliens? Seriously? That's the best story you could come up with." But as he said the words, Jake noticed something that made his breath catch in his throat. Luna's shadow on the wall wasn't quite right. It was definitely her shadow, but it seemed to have more depth than a normal shadow should have, and occasionally it appeared to move independently of her body. "I know it sounds unbelievable," Luna said, standing up as well, "but look around. You, Jake, have you noticed anything unusual about this place? The way the carpet patterns seem to shift, the humming in the walls, the taste of the air." Jake had noticed all of those things, but he had been trying to ignore them. It doesn't prove anything. Old buildings have weird quirks. "What about the view from your window?" Luna asked. "When you looked out last night, did you see what you expected to see?" Jake fell silent. He had definitely seen something strange in the distance, but he had convinced himself it was just his imagination. "I was tired. My eyes were playing tricks." "On me, were they?" Luna walked to the window and opened the curtains. In the bright daylight, the view was even more bizarre than it had been the night before. The parking lot was still there, but beyond it, instead of desert, there was a landscape that looked like something from a dream. Rolling hills covered in that same impossible vegetation from the photograph, with buildings in the distance that seemed to be made of light itself. Jake stared out the window in complete shock. "This is impossible. This can't be real." "Reality is much bigger than most people realize," Luna said gently. "Love is the most powerful force in any reality. And that's what brought us together, Jake. That's what keeps bringing you back here. Even when your conscious mind forgets." Jake turned away from the window and looked at Luna again. Despite everything his rational mind was telling him, he felt an overwhelming urge to trust her. There was something about her presence that made him feel safe and cared for in a way he had never experienced before. "So what happens now?" he asked quietly. "If what you're saying is true, what are we supposed to do?" Luna smiled again, and this time Jake could see genuine joy in her violet eyes. "Now we get to spend time together. We can walk through the gardens, talk about everything and nothing, and just be happy. That's all we've ever wanted, just to be together." Jake picked up the photograph from the floor and looked at it again. The happiness on their faces was so genuine, so pure, that it made his heart ache with longing. Maybe he didn't understand what was happening, but he knew one thing for certain. He wanted to feel that happy again. Okay, he said finally. I still don't understand any of this, but I want to try. I want to remember what we had. Luna's smile could have lit up the entire hotel. And let's start making new memories to help you remember the old ones. Luna took Jake's hand, and the moment their skin touched, something incredible happened. It was like a dam burst open in his mind. And suddenly, he was flooded with images and feelings that felt both completely foreign and deeply familiar at the same time. He saw himself walking through a city made entirely of crystal, where buildings reached toward a sky that was painted in shades of purple and gold. The streets were filled with beings that looked similar to humans, but moved with a grace that seemed almost like dancing. And there, walking beside him, was Luna, pointing out different landmarks and laughing at something he had said. Jake stumbled backward, his head spinning from the sudden rush of memories. What was that? How did you do that? I didn't do anything, Luna said softly. Those memories were already inside you. It just needed the right trigger to come back to the surface. Our connection runs deeper than what most people experience. Jake sat down in the chair by the window, trying to process what he had just experienced. Those places I saw, ... they look so real. They can't be real, right? Cities made of crystal don't exist. They exist on my world, Luna explained, sitting on the edge of the bed so she could face him. My home planet is called Kepler 44b, and it's about 1,200 light years away from Earth. The cities there are grown rather than built, using technology that works with natural crystal formations. This is insane, Jake muttered, rubbing his temples. Yesterday I was just a regular guy driving to a business meeting. Now you're telling me I have memories of visiting alien planets? You're still a regular guy, Luna said with a gentle smile. But regular doesn't mean ordinary. Every person has the potential for extraordinary experiences if they're open to them. As she spoke, more flashes of memory began surfacing in Jake's mind. He remembered learning to use some kind of device that looked like a tablet but responded to his thoughts instead of his touch. He remembered tasting foods that had flavors he couldn't describe. He was watching two suns set over an ocean that was silver instead of blue. How is this possible? Jake asked, looking at Luna with a mixture of wonder and confusion. How can I have memories of things that never happened? Who says they never happened? Luna stood up and walked to a small bag she had brought with her. She pulled out something that looked like a combination of a smartphone and a piece of jewelry. It was about the size of Jake's palm, made from what appeared to be the same crystal material he had seen in his memory flashes. This is a memory keeper, Luna explained, holding the device carefully. It stores experiences so they can be shared or reviewed later. Would you like to see some of the time we've spent together? Jake hesitated. Part of him wanted to run away from this whole situation and pretend it was all a weird dream. But another part of him, a part that was growing stronger by the minute, desperately wanted to understand what was happening to him. Okay, he said finally. Show me. Luna touched the crystal device, and suddenly the air above it began to shimmer. Images appeared, floating in the space between them, like a three-dimensional movie. Jake watched in amazement as he saw himself and Luna in dozens of different scenarios. There they were, sharing a meal at a table that seemed to be carved from a single piece of wood, with food that glowed softly and tasted like happiness itself. There they were, walking through a garden where the flowers sang in harmony when the wind blew through them. There they were, sitting on a hillside under those purple and gold skies, talking and laughing like old friends. We did all of this? Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. We did, Luna confirmed. Every few years, for the past 20 years. You've been coming here? Sometimes you stay for a few days, sometimes for a week. We explore, we learn about each other's worlds, and we fall in love all over again. Jake watched one particular memory where he and Luna were dancing to music that seemed to come from the very air around them. The Jake in the memory looked so happy, so free, so different from the stressed-out business consultant he had become in his regular life. Why don't I remember any of this when I go back home? Jake asked. Luna's expression grew sad. Because your world and mine exist in different dimensions. When you return to Earth, your consciousness shifts back to your regular timeline. The memories of our time together get stored in a part of your mind that your everyday self can't access. Sounds like science fiction, Jake said, but even as he spoke, he realized how ridiculous that complaint was, considering everything else he had experienced in the past hour. Science fiction is just science that hasn't been fully understood yet, Luna replied. Your Earth scientists are already beginning to discover that there are multiple dimensions existing alongside your own. They just don't have the technology to travel between them yet. Jake stood up and walked to the window again. The impossible landscape outside suddenly made more sense. So this hotel is like a bridge between our worlds? Exactly. The Starlight Inn exists in a space where our dimensions overlap. The staff here are all interdimensional beings who help facilitate meetings between people from different worlds. The old man at the front desk, Jake said, remembering how the clerk had seemed to know him. He's not human either. He's what we call a guardian, Luna explained. His job is to make sure that meetings like ours happen safely and that both parties are protected during the dimensional crossing. Jake turned back to Luna, and as he looked at her, more memories began flooding back. He remembered the first time they had met, how nervous he had been, and how patient she had been in explaining everything to him. He remembered learning her language, which was spoken as much through emotional connection as through words. He remembered the way she had shown him wonders beyond his imagination, while never making him feel stupid or small. I remember you teaching me to communicate with the crystal gardens, Jake said suddenly. They weren't just pretty decorations, they were alive, and they could share their experiences with anyone who knew how to listen. Luna's face lit up with joy. Yes. You were so excited when you first managed to connect with them. You said it was like hearing the planet's heartbeat. I remember the ceremony, Jake continued, more memories surfacing with each passing moment. We exchanged those glowing stones, and they bonded us somehow. That's why I can remember things. When I touch you? The stones were called life crystals, Luna explained. They create a connection between two people that transcends physical separation. Even when you're back on Earth, part of me is always with you, and part of you is always with me. Jake felt tears forming in his eyes as he realized the full scope of what they had shared. How many times have we had to say goodbye? Many times, Luna said quietly. But we've also said hello many times too. And each reunion has been worth every moment of separation. Jake walked over to Luna and took her hands in his. This time, instead of being overwhelmed by the rush of memories, he felt a sense of completeness, like a puzzle piece had finally clicked into place. I love you, he said, and the words felt both brand new and ancient at the same time. I love you too, Luna replied. I always have, and I always will. They stood there for a moment, holding each other's hands and letting the weight of their shared history settle around them. Jake knew that his logical mind would probably start questioning everything again soon. But for now, he was content to exist in this moment of perfect understanding. So what happens now? Jake asked. Luna's smile was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Now, we make the most of the time we have together. But Jake, there's something I need to tell you. Something that makes this visit different from all the others. The serious tone in her voice made Jake's stomach tighten with worry. What is it? This might be our last time together, Luna said softly. Things are changing in both our worlds, and the pathway between dimensions is becoming unstable. After this visit, the connection might be lost forever. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. What do you mean this might be our last time together? Why would the connection be lost? Luna's violet eyes filled with sadness as she sat back down on the bed. There's been a lot of tension between our worlds lately. Some people on my planet think that interactions with other dimensions are dangerous. They believe it's causing instability in our reality. Some people on my world probably think the same thing, Jake said, understanding dawning on him. Governments don't like things they can't control. Exactly. The Interdimensional Council has decided to close most of the crossing points. The Starlight Inn is one of the last places where meetings like ours can still happen, but even this location will be shut down soon. Jake ran his hands through his hair, feeling overwhelmed by the enormity of what Luna was telling him. So after this week, we'll never see each other again? Not unless. Luna paused, looking uncertain for the first time since Jake had met her. There is one possibility, but it's not simple. Tell me, Jake said immediately. Whatever it is. I want to know. Luna stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the impossible landscape beyond. I could bring you back with me. Permanently. You could live on my world and we could be together always. Jake's heart leaped at the possibility, but then reality set in. What about my life here? My job? My family? My friends? That's the difficult part, Luna said quietly. If you come with me, your Earth life would simply ... end. As far as everyone here is concerned, you would just disappear. Your friends and family would never know what happened to you. The weight of that statement hit Jake hard. He thought about his sister, who called him every week, just to check in. His best friend from college, who was getting married next month, and had asked Jake to be his best man. His parents, who were getting older and would need him more as time went on. But if I stay here, Jake said slowly, I'll lose you forever. Yes, Luna whispered, and I'll lose you too. They stood in silence for a long moment, both of them processing the impossible choice they were facing. Jake had never imagined that love could be so wonderful and so painful at the same time. Can I think about it? Jake asked finally. Of course, Luna said. You have until tomorrow night. The portal will close at midnight, and after that the decision will be made for us. Jake nodded, his mind already spinning with questions and doubts. I need to understand more about what I'd be giving up and what I'd be gaining. Can you show me more about your world? Luna smiled, and Jake could see that she was trying to be hopeful, despite the sadness in her eyes. I'd love to show you everything. Spent the rest of the day exploring different areas of the hotel that Jake hadn't seen before. Luna explained that each floor existed in a slightly different dimensional space, allowing visitors to experience aspects of various worlds without fully traveling to them. On the third floor, they found a library, where the books read themselves, aloud when you opened them, telling stories from 1,000 different planets. Jake listened to tales of adventure and romance, of civilizations that had risen and fallen, of heroes who had made choices similar to the one he was facing now. The fourth floor had a restaurant where the food was prepared by beings from Luna's world. Jake tasted dishes that were unlike anything he had ever experienced. There were fruits that tasted like sunshine and music combined, and drinks that seemed to contain the essence of peaceful mornings and warm hugs. This is incredible, Jake said as they shared a dessert that looked like a small galaxy and tasted like the best parts of every birthday cake he had ever eaten. Your world must be amazing. It is, Luna agreed. But it's also very different from Earth. The pace of life is slower, and we value different things. Success isn't measured by how much money you make or how high you climb in a company. Measured by how much joy you bring to others and how deeply you connect with the world around you. Jake thought about his life on Earth, with its constant stress and competition. He made good money, but he was always tired, always worried about the next deadline or the next promotion. When was the last time he had felt truly happy? What would I do for work on your world? Jake asked. You wouldn't need to work in the way. You understand it here, Luna explained. Everyone contributes to society, but it's based on what brings you fulfillment rather than what pays the bills. I remember you being fascinated by our crystal gardens. You could become a garden keeper, helping to grow and maintain the living structures that make up our cities. Jake tried to imagine himself in that role, tending to gardens that were alive and responsive, helping to grow buildings that were both beautiful and functional. It sounded peaceful and meaningful in a way that his current job never had. On the fifth floor, they met other couples who were facing similar decisions. There was a woman from a world where people communicated through colors, and she was in love with someone from a planet where music was the primary language. There was a man from Earth who had already decided to leave his world behind for someone from a dimension where time moved differently. How did you decide? Jake asked the man. I realized that I was already living a half-life, the man replied. I was going through the motions of my old existence, but I wasn't truly alive. When I met her, I remembered what it felt like to be completely myself. The choice became obvious. But Jake also met people who had chosen to stay in their original worlds. A woman from Luna's planet had decided to remain there rather than come to Earth with her human partner. She looked sad, but also at peace with her decision. I had responsibilities I couldn't abandon, she explained. My younger siblings needed me, and my community was depending on me to help them through a difficult time. Love is important, but it's not the only thing that matters. As the day wore on, Jake found himself becoming more and more conflicted. Every conversation seemed to present new arguments for both sides of the decision. His heart wanted to be with Luna, but his mind kept reminding him of all the people and responsibilities he would be leaving behind. That evening, they sat together in the hotel's garden, which had somehow expanded to include plants from both their worlds. The flowers from Luna's planet glowed softly in the twilight, while earth roses provided a familiar scent that reminded Jake of his childhood home. I keep thinking about my sister, Jake said quietly. She's been having a hard time lately, and I promised I'd help her through it. If I disappear, she'll think I abandoned her. And I keep thinking about my research, Luna replied. I've been working on a project that could help bridge the gap between our worlds, maybe even prevent the closure of places like this. If I come to Earth with you, that work would be left unfinished. Jake looked at her in surprise. You'd give up your work to come to Earth? I'd give up anything to be with you, Luna said simply. But I know that's not necessarily the right choice. Sometimes love means making sacrifices, even when those sacrifices are incredibly painful. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the strange sunset paint the sky in colors that existed nowhere on Earth. Jake realized that whatever decision they made, their lives would be forever changed. The question was whether they would change together or apart. What if we're wrong about this being our last chance? Jake asked. What if the dimensional barriers open again someday? Luna shook her head sadly. The Council's decision is final. They're not just closing the crossing points, they're severing the connections entirely. Even if they wanted to reopen them later, they wouldn't have the ability to do so. Jake felt a tear roll down his cheek. Then whatever we choose, we have to live with it forever. Yes, Luna whispered, taking his hand. We have to choose between love and duty, between our hearts and our responsibilities. And we have to choose. By tomorrow night? As they walked back to the hotel, Jake realized that he had less than 24 hours to make the most important decision of his life. He had never felt more scared or more uncertain about anything. Jake spent the entire night staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with thoughts and emotions. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Luna's face, but he also saw his sister crying when she realized he was gone. He imagined his parents waiting for phone calls that would never come, and his best friend standing at the altar wondering why his best man had disappeared. But then he thought about Luna, alone on her distant planet, knowing that the love of her life had chosen duty over there. Connection. He pictured her tending to her crystal gardens, always wondering what could have been. As the sun rose, Jake realized he hadn't slept at all. Got dressed and went downstairs to the hotel restaurant, hoping some coffee might help clear his head. The elderly desk clerk was there, sitting at a corner table with a cup of tea that seemed to shimmer with its own light. Mind if I join you? Jake asked. Please sit, the old man said with that same mysterious smile. I imagine you have a lot on your mind. Jake sat down and ordered coffee from a waitress who looked perfectly human except for the fact that her shadow moved independently of her body. Can I ask you something? You've been here a long time, haven't you? You must have seen a lot of people make this choice. I have, the man nodded. And I've learned that there's no right or wrong answer. It's only the choice that feels true to who you are. But how do I know who I am? Jake asked desperately. I feel like I'm two different people. There's the Jake who lives on Earth and has responsibilities and commitments. And there's the Jake who belongs with Luna in a world of crystal cities and singing flowers. The old man stirred his tea thoughtfully. Maybe the question isn't which. Jake is real. Maybe they're both real, and you need to decide which one you want to be. Jake sipped his coffee, which tasted like the best coffee he'd ever had mixed with something that reminded him of starlight. What would you do? Everything for love once, the man said quietly. I left my world, my family, my entire life behind for someone I couldn't live without. And I've never regretted it for a single moment. But what about the people you left behind? They mourned me, and then they moved on. People are more resilient. than we give them credit for. Your sister will be sad, but she'll find her strength. Your parents will miss you, but they'll understand that you found happiness. Your friends will remember you fondly and tell stories about the mysterious guy who disappeared one day. Jake felt tears forming in his eyes. And what about Luna's world? What about her research? Love has a way of creating new possibilities, the man said. Perhaps together, you could find solutions that neither of you could discover alone. After breakfast, Jake found Luna in the hotel garden. She was sitting on a bench made of that same crystal material, watching the impossible flowers sway in a breeze that smelled like cinnamon and rain. I've been thinking all night, Jake said, sitting beside her. So have I, Luna replied, and I've come to a decision. Jake's heart stopped. What decision? I'm going to stay on my world, Luna said quietly. I can't ask you to give up everything. For me, it's not fair. But what about us? Jake asked, feeling panic rise in his chest. We'll always have what we've shared, Luna said, taking his hand. These memories, these feelings, they're real and beautiful, and they'll always be part of us. Maybe that's enough. Jake looked at her, seeing the pain in her violet eyes despite her brave words. Is it enough for you? It has to be, Luna whispered. But Jake could hear the heartbreak in her voice. They sat in silence for a long moment, holding hands and watching the strange sunset begin to paint the sky in impossible colors. Jake realized that in a few hours, this would all be over. Luna would return to her world, and he would go back to his regular life on Earth, carrying memories that would fade over time until they felt like dreams. No, Jake said suddenly, standing up. This isn't right.
What do you mean?
Luna asked, looking up at him with surprised eyes. This whole situation is wrong. We're being forced to choose between love and everything else we care about. But if there's another way? Luna shook her head sadly. Jake, we've been through this. The Council's decision is final. The dimensional barriers are being closed. But what if we could change their minds? Jake asked, his excitement growing. You said you've been working on research that could help bridge the gap between worlds. What if we could prove that connections between dimensions make both worlds stronger, not weaker? It's not that simple, Luna said, but Jake could see a spark of hope in her eyes. Maybe it is, Jake insisted. You have your research, and I have something too. I have a perspective that no one else in your world has. I'm someone who's lived in both realities, who understands what both worlds have to offer. Luna stood up, her face lighting up with possibility. You mean we could work together? We could present a case to the council? Could try, Jake said. And even if we fail, at least we'll have tried together. They spent the rest of the day working on a plan. Luna explained her research in more detail, and Jake was amazed by what she had discovered. She had found evidence that connections between dimensions actually stabilized both realities, creating a kind of cosmic balance that benefited everyone. But the council refused to listen, Luna said. They said my research was too theoretical, too risky. What if it wasn't just theoretical? Jake asked. What if we could provide real living proof? I'm evidence that dimensional crossing works. I've been traveling between worlds for 20 years, and I'm perfectly fine. Better than fine, actually. These experiences have made me more open-minded, more creative, more capable of seeing solutions that others miss. As the hours passed, Jake felt more certain that this was the right path. Instead of choosing between his two worlds, he would fight for both of them. He would help Luna prove that love and connection between dimensions could make the universe a better place. There's one problem, Luna said as they prepared their presentation. Even if we can convince the council to listen, we'd need to appear before them in person. And if we're wrong, if they reject our proposal, the dimensional barriers will close while we're there. You'd be trapped on my world forever. Jake looked at Luna, seeing the woman he loved more than life itself, and realized that the choice had always been simple. Then we better make sure we're right. You're willing to risk everything for this? Luna asked. I'm willing to risk everything for us, Jake replied, and for the possibility that other people won't have to face the same impossible choice we've been facing. That evening, as the portal began to open in the hotel's basement, Jake made his final decision. He wasn't choosing between love and duty. He was choosing to fight for both. Are you ready? Luna asked, taking his hand as they stood before the swirling dimensional gateway. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," Jake said. Together, they stepped through the portal and into the unknown. Behind them, the Starlight Inn stood empty, its mission complete. The elderly desk clerk smiled and began updating his records. Some guests chose love, some chose duty, and some chose to change the rules entirely. As Jake and Luna disappeared into the swirling light, the clerk made a note in his ledger. Sometimes the bravest choice is refusing to choose at all. 3 months later, dimensional crossing points began reopening throughout the galaxy. The Interdimensional Council had been convinced by a passionate presentation from a human-alien research team, who proved that love truly was the strongest force in any universe. And in a crystal city under purple and gold skies, Jake tended to gardens that sang with joy, knowing that he had found a way to have everything he had ever wanted. His sister received regular letters from her brother, who had found work as a dimensional cultural consultant in a place she couldn't pronounce. His parents were proud of their son's mysterious but important work, and his best friend got married. With Jake standing beside him, having returned to Earth through a newly reopened portal just for the occasion, love had found a way, just as it always does.